On a warm spring evening in April 2012, the quiet suburbs of Riverside, California, became the backdrop for one of the most disturbing crimes in modern American history. What started as an ordinary day at a local shopping center would spiral into an 11-hour ordeal that claimed 4 innocent lives and revealed catastrophic breakdowns in our justice system. This is the story of the Morrison family, a tale of unspeakable horror, unexpected heroism, and a city forever transformed. But it's also a story that challenges us to examine uncomfortable truths about criminal rehabilitation, electronic monitoring failures, and whether our legal system truly protects those who need it most. Are you ready to explore the depths of human darkness? Then subscribe to True Crime Files, like and comment. And now let's dive into today's case. The Morrison family embodied everything we associate with the California dream. Dr. Robert Morrison was a prominent cardiologist at Riverside University Medical Center, where he had built his practice since 1995. Born on March 12, 1960 in Sacramento, California, Robert came from humble beginnings. His mother worked as a school teacher while his father managed a local hardware store. After graduating from Stanford University with honors, Robert attended Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, where his entire world would shift on its axis. In 1987, while completing his residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, he encountered Sarah Mitchell, a pediatric physical therapist who had just joined the rehabilitation department. Their chemistry was instantaneous and undeniable. They married on June 8, 1988 in Annapolis, Maryland, in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. Sarah, born April 3, 1962 in Portland, Oregon, radiated warmth and compassion in everything she undertook. She became the director of student wellness at Riverside Preparatory Academy, an elite private institution where students and faculty alike cherished her presence. Despite being diagnosed with lupus in her early 30s, Sarah refused to let her condition limit her impact. Instead, she transformed it into a mission that would galvanize her entire family toward advocacy and fundraising. The Morrisons had 2 daughters and 1 son who were the absolute center of their universe. Emma Grace Morrison, born March 22, 1994, was 18 years old in the spring of 2012. She had just completed her senior year at the prestigious Riverside Preparatory Academy, where she had distinguished herself in virtually every arena. Emma ran varsity track, played volleyball and lacrosse, maintained her position on the principal's honor roll, and had been elected student body president, the highest leadership position available to seniors. She had been accepted to Stanford University, her father's alma mater, where she intended to pursue pre-med studies and continue the Morrison legacy of medical service. But Emma's deepest commitment was combating lupus in honor of her mother. She led a Team Lupus LA fundraising group called Emma's Warriors and received multiple community service awards for her tireless dedication. Her commitment to this cause would become an integral part of how the community would remember her. 15-year-old Sophia Ann Morrison, born August 29, 1996, was the family's artistic soul. She attended Riverside Preparatory Academy alongside her sister and had a passion for photography and painting. She spent countless hours in her darkroom developing film and had recently won a regional art competition with a series of portraits documenting her mother's battle with lupus. The youngest Morrison child, 12-year-old Jackson David Morrison, born February 14, 2000, was the family's athlete and comedian. He attended Riverside Middle School and excelled in baseball and swimming. On April 15, 2012, he accompanied his mother and sisters to the Riverside Galleria shopping center to buy supplies for a family barbecue he was planning for his father's upcoming birthday. Jackson had already announced that when Emma left for Stanford in the fall, he would take over leading Emma's Warriors and rename it Jackson's Journey. The Morrisons were deeply woven into the fabric of their community. Their home on Magnolia Heights Drive in Riverside was a sanctuary of accomplishment, laughter, and hope. They had constructed a life that represented the best of what America offers: professional success, exceptional children, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. But they had no idea they had attracted the attention of 3 men who would obliterate everything they cherished. Marcus DeLuca was 29 years old in 2012, with an extensive record of armed robbery convictions and methamphetamine addiction. Born on November 3, 1982, he had been raised in a foster care system that shuffled him between 7 different homes before he aged out at 18. Despite having a high IQ and testing into gifted programs as a child, Marcus's life had taken a progressively darker path. He had cycled through the criminal justice system repeatedly, and by April 2012 he was supposedly being monitored through an electronic ankle bracelet as part of his parole agreement. Trevor Walsh, 36 years old, carried an even more disturbing criminal history extending back to an aggravated assault conviction in 1994 when he was just 18. Born on January 15, 1976, in San Bernardino, Trevor had spent the majority of his adult years moving in and out of California's prison system. Psychiatric evaluations conducted during his various incarcerations revealed a pattern of antisocial behavior and lack of empathy that began in early childhood, including documented incidents of animal cruelty and violence toward younger foster siblings. The third man, Devin Carter, was 24 years old and the youngest of the trio. Born July 8, 1987, Devin had a juvenile record sealed by the courts, but his adult convictions included burglary, grand theft auto, and assault with a deadly weapon. What made Devin particularly dangerous was his intelligence and his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. The three men had connected through an online forum that ostensibly existed for former inmates to support each other's rehabilitation. In reality, it has become a networking platform for criminals to plan their next crimes and share techniques for evading law enforcement detection. All three were supposed to be under various forms of supervision: electronic monitoring, parole check-ins, mandatory counseling sessions. But on April 15, 2012, they were free to roam the streets of Riverside, searching for their next victims. Sunday afternoon, April 15, 2012, seemed unremarkable in every way. Sarah Morrison took her three children to the Riverside Galleria, an upscale shopping center on the east side of the city. Jackson was excited about planning his father's birthday barbecue and wanted to personally select everything from the steaks to the decorations. As they moved through the outdoor shopping plaza, they had no awareness they were being observed. Marcus DeLuca spotted them near the Williams-Sonoma store. Later testimony and evidence presented at trial would reveal that he followed Sarah and the children from store to store, taking photographs with his phone, noting the luxury SUV they drove, and eventually tracking them back to their residence on Magnolia Heights Drive. He studied the family, their behaviors, their clearly affluent lifestyle, their beautiful home in one of Riverside's most exclusive neighborhoods. He saw vulnerability. He saw an opportunity. He saw substantial financial gain. That evening, DeLuca contacted both Walsh and Carter. At 6:30 p.m., Walsh sent a text message that would later chill everyone who read it. "Tonight's the night. 3 kids means leverage. We're gonna eat well tomorrow." Over the following 3 hours, between 6:30 p.m. and 9:45 p.m., the three men exchanged more than 40 text messages and several calls that prosecutors would subsequently use as irrefutable evidence of premeditation and conspiracy. They weren't just planning a burglary. They were plotting something far more elaborate and sinister. Police investigation would later uncover that the trio had visited a hardware store that evening, purchasing zip ties, duct tape, and bolt cutters. They had stopped at a gas station and filled multiple containers with fuel. They were methodically preparing not just for a home invasion, but for something that would ensure no witnesses remained. The Morrison family went to sleep that night completely unaware that 3 violent predators had marked them for destruction and were actively preparing to shatter their lives forever. The exact moment of entry was later established through multiple sources of evidence. Cell phone tower data, surveillance footage from neighboring properties, and forensic analysis of the home security system all pointed to approximately 2:45 a.m. on Monday, April 16, when Walsh, DeLuca, and Carter breached the Morrison home. They had cut the phone lines first, then disabled the security system using techniques they had learned online. They entered through a side door that accessed the home's laundry room, a vulnerable point in the house's otherwise robust security. Dr. Robert Morrison was sleeping in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor when he was awakened by the sensation of a gun pressed against his temple. The shock was immediate and disorienting. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, he was dragged from his bed as his wife Sarah screamed in terror. Both Robert and Sarah were forced downstairs to the living room. The attackers bound them with zip ties and duct tape, then beat Robert viciously when he attempted to resist. Later medical documentation would detail the extent of his injuries: fractured ribs, a broken nose, severe concussion, and extensive internal bleeding. The children were rounded up next. Emma, Sophia, and Jackson were pulled from their beds, terrified and crying, and brought to the living room where their parents were already restrained. The intruders told them this was simply a robbery, that cooperation would ensure everyone's safety. It was a calculated lie designed to maintain control while they executed a much more sinister plan. For approximately 11 hours, the Morrison family endured psychological and physical torture. The intruders systematically searched the house, demanding information about bank accounts, credit cards, safe combinations, and any valuables. They rifled through personal belongings, stole jewelry, and photographed documents they could use for identity theft. But this was never just about robbery. The text messages recovered from their phones revealed their true intentions. They planned to extract maximum financial benefit from the family and then eliminate all witnesses to ensure they could never be identified. Around 6 a.m. as dawn began breaking over Riverside, Devin Carter made a chilling discovery while searching through Robert's home office. He found documents indicating that Robert had recently received a substantial inheritance from his late father's estate, money that was currently sitting in several bank accounts. The amount was significant, nearly $800,000. This discovery changed everything. What had been planned as a robbery escalating to murder now became an extended hostage situation as the three men strategized about how to access these accounts without immediately triggering law enforcement attention. At approximately 8:30 a.m., the intruders made their decision. They would force Robert to go to multiple banks and withdraw as much cash as possible while holding his family hostage to ensure his compliance. It was a calculated gamble that would prove to be their fatal mistake. But Robert, despite his injuries and terror, was already thinking several steps ahead. He knew that the moment he left that house, he might be his family's only hope for rescue. He began formulating a plan. At 9:15 a.m., Marcus DeLuca drove Robert to the First Bank, a Wells Fargo branch on Arlington Avenue. Trevor Walsh and Devin Carter remained at the Morrison home, guarding Sarah and the three children with explicit threats about what would happen if Robert failed to cooperate or attempted to signal for help. Robert entered the bank with DeLuca watching from the parking lot. His face was visibly injured and he moved with obvious pain. When he approached the teller, he requested to withdraw $10,000 in cash, the maximum allowed without triggering additional scrutiny. But Robert did something extraordinarily brave. As he filled out the withdrawal slip, he wrote a barely visible message in the corner: "Help hostages 2847 Magnolia." The teller, a young woman named Christina Ramirez, processed the transaction but noticed Robert's injuries and his trembling hands. Something felt terribly wrong. After Robert left, Christina immediately brought the withdrawal slip to her manager, David Nguyen. David saw the message instantly. At 9:22 a.m., he called 911. The dispatcher, Jennifer Martinez, took the call with professional calm but recognized immediately that this was a critical situation. She kept David on the line, gathering every detail while simultaneously alerting patrol units. At 9:24 a.m., a BOLO, "Be on the lookout," was broadcast to all Riverside police units with the Magnolia Heights Drive address and vehicle descriptions for both the Morrison family SUV and any vehicles that might be associated with the suspects. At 9:26 a.m., Detective Sarah Chin from the Riverside Police Department's Major Crimes Unit was notified and immediately began coordinating a response. But there was a critical problem. They didn't know how many suspects were involved, how they were armed, or what condition the hostages were in. A hasty raid could result in a massacre. Meanwhile, Robert was being driven to a second bank. DeLuca had received a text from the others demanding he extract more money. At 9:45 a.m., they arrived at a Bank of America branch on University Avenue. Robert went through the same process, this time withdrawing $15,000. And once again he managed to write a message, this time more explicitly: "Call police, family hostage, 3 armed men, 2847 Magnolia." The teller at this bank, an older man named Gregory Foster, saw the message immediately and, while maintaining his composure, signaled to his manager as soon as Robert left. The call to 911 came at 9:48 a.m., providing confirmation and additional details to the already mobilizing police response. Detective Chin now had confirmation of 3 armed suspects and a family being held hostage. She made the decision to assemble a SWAT team and establish a perimeter around the Morrison residence, but to hold off on any direct action until they had better intelligence about the situation inside. Back at the Morrison home, the situation had deteriorated into something unspeakable. While DeLuca was at the bank with Robert, Walsh and Carter had been alone with Sarah and the children for nearly 2 hours. Evidence presented at trial, including forensic analysis and testimony from the medical examiner, would reveal that during this time, Walsh assaulted Sarah while forcing the children to watch. It was an act of pure cruelty designed to terrorize the family into absolute submission. Carter, meanwhile, had become fixated on 15-year-old Sophia. He separated her from her mother and siblings, taking her to another room. What happened next would become some of the most disturbing evidence presented at trial. Carter photographed Sophia with his cell phone, images that would later be used as crucial evidence in establishing the timeline and nature of the crimes. 12-year-old Jackson, despite his youth and terror, showed remarkable courage. When Walsh became distracted, Jackson managed to partially free his hands from the zip ties. He didn't try to escape. He knew that would endanger his mother and sisters. Instead, he waited, looking for any opportunity to help. 18-year-old Emma, bound near her mother, whispered encouragement to her younger siblings, telling them to stay calm, that their father would find a way to save them. She had no idea that at that very moment, her father was doing exactly that, risking his life to send messages that would bring help. At 10:30 a.m., DeLuca and Robert returned to the house with approximately $25,000 in cash. But it wasn't enough. The three intruders had discussed it via text and decided they wanted access to the entire inheritance. They planned to force Robert to arrange an electronic wire transfer of the remaining funds. But they also knew, from monitoring police scanners on Carter's phone, that there was increased police radio traffic in the area. They were running out of time and they knew it. That's when they made the decision that would define them as monsters. Rather than flee with the money they had already obtained, leaving behind witnesses who could identify them, they decided to eliminate the entire family and burn the house to destroy evidence. At approximately 11:15 a.m., they began their final preparations. Trevor Walsh retrieved the gasoline containers they had prepared the night before. They were stored in the garage, ready for this exact purpose. The plan had always been to end this with fire. The family was moved to different locations in the house. Robert was taken to the master bedroom on the second floor. Sarah remained in the living room. Emma and Sophia were brought to Emma's bedroom. Jackson was placed in his own room. All 5 family members were bound even more securely, with additional zip ties and duct tape ensuring they couldn't free themselves. The intruders wanted to make certain no one could escape what was coming. Devin Carter poured gasoline throughout the first floor, creating trails that would ensure rapid fire spread. Marcus DeLuca doused the staircase and upper hallway. Trevor Walsh handled the bedrooms, pouring accelerant around each family member's location. But what the 3 criminals didn't know was that Detective Chen had made a critical decision. Based on the bank reports and the escalating situation, she had authorized the SWAT team to move into position for a potential rescue operation. Tactical units were now stationed at multiple points around the Morrison property, with snipers positioned on neighboring rooftops and entry teams ready to breach on her command. At 11:32 a.m., a neighbor 2 houses down called 911 reporting suspicious activity at the Morrison residence, including seeing what appeared to be someone carrying containers into the house. This additional confirmation pushed Detective Chen to make her move. At 11:35 a.m., she gave the order to prepare for immediate tactical entry. But they were seconds too late. At 11:36 a.m., Marcus DeLuca lit the first match. The gasoline ignited with terrifying speed. Flames raced through the first floor, up the staircase, spreading to the second floor in seconds. The house became an inferno almost instantaneously. Sarah Morrison died first. The medical examiner would later determine that she had been strangled before the fire reached her, a final act of violence from Trevor Walsh. But Emma, Sophia, and Jackson were all alive when the flames began consuming the house. On the second floor, Dr. Robert Morrison experienced every parent's worst nightmare. He could hear his children screaming. He could smell the smoke, feel the heat intensifying. Despite his severe injuries, despite being bound securely, he fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. The zip ties cut into his wrists, drawing blood, but adrenaline and desperation gave him power beyond normal human capability. He managed to break free from the ties binding his legs, then used the sharp edge of a broken bedside table to cut through the restraints on his wrists. The bedroom was filled with thick, black smoke. The heat was becoming unbearable. Robert knew he had only seconds before the smoke would overcome him or the floor would collapse. He stumbled to the bedroom window and, using a chair, smashed through it. But he didn't jump. Instead, he screamed with everything he had left, "My children are inside. Help them." SWAT team members positioned nearby heard his cries and saw him in the window. At 11:38 a.m., Detective Chin ordered immediate breach and rescue operations. But the fire was spreading too quickly. As the house burned, the 3 perpetrators attempted their escape. They exited through the garage, getting into the Morrison family's SUV, which they had planned to use as their getaway vehicle. But as the garage door opened, they found themselves facing an array of police vehicles, SWAT team members, and drawn weapons. "Get out of the vehicle with your hands up." The command boomed through a loudspeaker. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then Trevor Walsh, who was driving, made a catastrophic decision. He slammed the SUV into reverse and floored the accelerator, attempting to ram through the police perimeter. The SUV collided with multiple police vehicles, creating a cacophony of crunching metal and shattering glass. Officers opened fire on the vehicle's tires, disabling it completely. Marcus DeLuca threw open the passenger door and attempted to run. He made it approximately 15 feet before being tackled by 3 SWAT officers. Devin Carter, in the back seat, simply raised his hands in surrender. Trevor Walsh, still in the driver's seat, reached for a gun. It would be his last action. 2 officers fired simultaneously, hitting Walsh in the shoulder and chest. He survived but was immediately incapacitated. By 11:42 a.m., all 3 suspects were in custody, secured in separate police vehicles while firefighters battled desperately to save anyone who might still be alive inside the burning Morrison home. Dr. Robert Morrison, despite his injuries and smoke inhalation, refused to be evacuated until firefighters had attempted to reach his children. He stood in the front yard, supported by paramedics, watching in agony as firefighters entered his burning home. The fire was eventually brought under control, but the damage was catastrophic. When firefighters could finally conduct a thorough search, they discovered what everyone had prayed they wouldn't find. 4 bodies were recovered from the house. Sarah Morrison, 49 years old, was found in the living room, strangled and partially burned. Emma Morrison, 18 years old, was discovered in her bedroom, having died from smoke inhalation. She had been alive when the fire started. Sophia Morrison, 15 years old, was found near Emma, also killed by smoke inhalation before the flames reached her. Jackson Morrison, 12 years old, was found in his bedroom. The medical examiner would later determine that despite being bound, Jackson had managed to free one hand. He had died trying to escape, overcome by smoke just feet from his bedroom window. Dr. Robert Morrison, the sole survivor, collapsed when he received the news. He had survived, but everything that gave his life meaning had been taken from him. The investigation into the Morrison family murders became one of the most comprehensive criminal cases in Riverside's history. Multiple agencies coordinated their efforts, including the Riverside Police Department, California State Police Major Crimes Division, the FBI's Crisis Response Team, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives. The evidence against Walsh, DeLuca, and Carter was overwhelming and multifaceted. Text message records extracted from all 3 suspects' phones revealed not just premeditation, but detailed planning of the entire crime, including their intention to kill the family and burn the house. Messages between them included callous jokes about the leverage the children would provide and discussions about how much money they expected to extract from the family. Devin Carter's cell phone contained photographs that were almost unbearable to view. Digital images showed the victims bound and included explicit photos of the assaults on both Sarah and Sophia Morrison. FBI forensic examiner Linda Patterson testified about these images at trial, establishing exact timestamps that proved Carter's direct involvement in the assaults. Bank surveillance footage showed DeLuca with Robert at both banks, corroborating the forced withdrawal scheme. Gas station surveillance from the previous evening showed all 3 men purchasing the fuel containers and gasoline they would later use as accelerants. The withdrawal slips with Robert's hidden messages became powerful pieces of evidence, demonstrating both Robert's heroic actions and the terror the family had been experiencing. Medical examiner Dr. Patricia Caldwell provided detailed testimony about causes of death. Sarah had been strangled before the fire consumed her. Emma, Sophia, and Jackson had all died from smoke inhalation, with evidence indicating they had been conscious and aware when the fire began. Their bodies were found in positions suggesting they had been trying to escape their restraints when the smoke overcame them. Fire investigation experts from the ATF demonstrated through burn patterns, accelerant analysis, and damage assessment that this was undoubtedly arson with multiple points of ignition, proving premeditation and intent to destroy evidence. Perhaps most damning for any potential defense, toxicology reports showed that all 3 suspects had been completely sober at the time of the crimes. Blood samples collected immediately after their arrest showed no alcohol, no illegal drugs, no substances that could impair judgment or serve as a mitigating factor. They had been fully aware and in complete control of their actions throughout the entire ordeal. Additionally, investigators uncovered the catastrophic failure of the electronic monitoring system. Marcus DeLuca's ankle bracelet had been malfunctioning for 3 weeks before the crime, sending false location data to his parole officer. The parole office had received multiple error alerts but had failed to follow up. This failure would become a major point of public outcry and would trigger sweeping reforms in California's parole monitoring systems. On Tuesday, April 17, 2012, just 1 day after the murders, all 3 suspects were arraigned in Riverside Superior Court. The charges were staggering: multiple counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, arson, burglary, and conspiracy to commit murder. District Attorney Michael Brennan announced that the state would seek the death penalty for all three defendants. Each was charged with special circumstances that made them eligible for execution under California law. The bail was set at $25 million each, effectively ensuring none would see freedom before trial. The legal proceedings would stretch over several years, with Trevor Walsh being tried first, followed by Marcus DeLuca, and finally Devin Carter. Trevor Walsh's trial began on March 4, 2014, nearly 2 years after the murders. The prosecution presented their overwhelming evidence methodically and thoroughly. On April 18, 2014, the jury found Walsh guilty on all counts after just 6 hours of deliberation. The penalty phase began immediately. On May 2, 2014, the jury recommended the death penalty. On May 30, 2014, Judge Patricia Ramirez formally sentenced Walsh to death, calling the crimes acts of such depravity and cruelty that they shocked the conscience of this court and this community. Marcus DeLuca's trial commenced on September 8, 2014. His defense team attempted to argue that DeLuca had been coerced by Walsh and Carter, painting him as a reluctant participant who had gone along out of fear. The prosecution demolished this defense with the text messages showing DeLuca's enthusiasm and active planning. On October 22, 2014, DeLuca was found guilty on all counts. On November 14, 2014, he too received the death penalty. Devin Carter's trial was the longest and most emotionally difficult. It began on February 2, 2015. The photographs on his phone became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, establishing his direct involvement in the most heinous aspects of the crime. Carter's defense team presented evidence of severe childhood abuse and neglect, psychiatric evaluations showing antisocial personality disorder, and expert testimony about his diminished capacity for empathy. They argued for life without parole rather than execution. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On March 20, 2015, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts. On April 10, 2015, they recommended the death penalty. On May 1, 2015, Judge Ramirez sentenced Carter to death, making him the youngest person on California's death row at just 27 years old. All three men filed automatic appeals, as is standard in death penalty cases. Their appeals would wind through California's court system for years while they sat in separate facilities on death row. The Morrison family murders became a turning point for Riverside and for California's entire approach to parole monitoring and violent crime prevention. On April 21, 2012, just 5 days after the murders, more than 15,000 people attended a memorial service at the Riverside Convention Center. Dr. Robert Morrison, still recovering from his physical injuries and barely able to stand, gave a eulogy for his wife and children that left not a single person unmoved. "Sarah taught me that love was about service," he said, his voice breaking. "Emma showed me that leadership meant caring for others. Sophia reminded me daily that beauty exists in small moments. And Jackson, my little man, proved that courage has no age limit. They were my everything, and now they're gone, taken by evil that should never have been free to walk our streets." The community response was extraordinary. Within weeks, the Morrison Legacy Foundation was established to continue the charitable work that had been so important to the family, particularly advocacy for lupus research and support for crime victims' families. On July 4, 2012, Riverside held its first Light the Night for Morrison event, where more than 50,000 luminarias were lit throughout the city in memory of Sarah, Emma, Sophia, and Jackson. The event has been held annually every year since. But beyond memorials and tributes, the case sparked concrete reforms. In June 2012, California Governor Jerry Brown signed the Electronic Monitoring Accountability Act, which overhauled the state system for tracking paroled offenders. The law mandated redundant monitoring systems, immediate in-person checks when devices malfunction, and criminal liability for parole officers who fail to follow up on warning signs. The California Parole Board underwent a comprehensive review and restructuring. New risk assessment protocols were implemented. Parole officers received enhanced training in identifying dangerous behavior patterns, and supervision ratios were dramatically reduced to allow for more intensive monitoring of high-risk offenders. In 2013, California passed Jessica's Law Enhancement Statutes, named after a previous victim, which increased penalties for crimes committed while on parole and created a three-strikes policy for parole violations that would result in automatic revocation and re-imprisonment. Dr. Robert Morrison became one of the most powerful voices in the victims' rights movement. Despite his own trauma and grief, he testified before the California State Assembly, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, and numerous other legislative bodies about the failures that had allowed his family's murderers to be free. His advocacy helped shape national conversation about parole reform, electronic monitoring technology, and the balance between rehabilitation and public safety. Then came an unexpected development that would reignite one of America's most contentious debates. In November 2016, California voters passed Proposition 62, which abolished the death penalty in the state and converted all existing death sentences to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The proposition passed by a narrow margin, 51% to 49%, reflecting deep divisions in public opinion. Trevor Walsh, Marcus DeLuca, and Devin Carter, who had been sitting on death row for years while their appeals proceeded through the courts, would now serve life sentences instead of being executed. The reaction was immediate and intense. Victims' rights advocates, including Dr. Morrison himself, were outraged. They argued that the voters had overruled the jury's decision, that the punishment no longer fit the horrific nature of the crimes, and that justice had been denied. The jury saw every piece of evidence, Dr. Morrison said in a statement following the proposition's passage. They heard about every moment of terror my family endured. They looked at the photographs of what these monsters did. And they decided, unanimously, that these men deserved to die for their crimes. How can we now say that decision was wrong? Supporters of the proposition argued that the death penalty was inherently flawed, costly, and morally wrong regardless of the crime committed. They pointed to studies showing racial disparities in death penalty application, the risk of executing innocent people, and the astronomical costs of death penalty appeals compared to life imprisonment. The Morrison case became the central example used by both sides of the debate. On January 15, 2017, Trevor Walsh was formally resentenced by Judge Patricia Ramirez to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 180 years on related charges. Judge Ramirez's words during resentencing were withering. "You are an evil incarnate," she told Walsh. "You destroyed a family that represented the best of what humanity can be. You showed no mercy, no compassion, no humanity. While I am bound by law to impose this sentence, know that in my courtroom and in the eyes of this community, you will forever be seen as the monster you truly are." On February 3, 2017, Marcus DeLuca received an identical sentence. On March 10, 2017, Devin Carter was similarly sentenced. All 3 men will spend the remainder of their lives in California's maximum security prisons. They will never be eligible for parole. They will die behind bars. But they will not face execution, a fact that continues to generate controversy and debate. Sarah, Emma, Sophia, and Jackson Morrison were extraordinary individuals whose lives were stolen by 3 men who chose violence, cruelty, and murder over humanity. Sarah was more than a physical therapist and a mother. She was a healer who impacted countless lives at Riverside Preparatory Academy. Former students spoke at her memorial about her kindness, her ability to make anyone feel valued, and her strength in facing her own illness with grace while caring for others. Emma was positioned at the threshold of greatness. Her acceptance to Stanford, her athletic accomplishments, her leadership roles, and her compassion for others all indicated a young woman destined to make profound contributions to society. Her dedication to lupus advocacy showed a maturity and selflessness far beyond her years. The world lost not just an exceptional student, but a future leader in medicine and humanitarian work. Sophia, at just 15, had already demonstrated artistic talent that her teachers called once in a generation. Her photographic series documenting her mother's illness had been accepted for exhibition at a Los Angeles gallery, an unprecedented achievement for someone so young. That exhibition went forward posthumously, and her images have since traveled to galleries nationwide, ensuring her artistic vision lives on. Jackson, at 12 years old, had shown the courage and quick thinking that saved his father's life. The messages Robert managed to send were only possible because Jackson had distracted their captors at critical moments, giving his father precious seconds. His final act, dying while trying to free himself to help his family, embodied heroism that most adults never demonstrate. The Morrison family deserved to grow old together, to achieve their dreams, to contribute their gifts to the world. Instead, they became symbols, reminders that evil exists, that vigilance matters, and that our justice system must evolve to protect the innocent from predators who should never have been free. Dr. Robert Morrison has since remarried and had twin daughters, Emma Grace and Sarah Rose, born in 2016. He continues his medical practice and remains actively involved in the Morrison Legacy Foundation. He has channeled his grief into advocacy, ensuring that his first family's legacy includes tangible improvements in how our society addresses violent crime and protects potential victims. "I can never bring them back," Robert said in a 2020 interview on the 8th anniversary of the murders. "But I can work every day to ensure that other families don't suffer what mine suffered. That's what Sarah would want. That's what Emma would demand. That's what Sophia would capture in her art. That's what Jackson would fight for. So that's what I do. For them." The Morrison family home on Magnolia Heights Drive was demolished shortly after the crime scene investigation concluded. The property sat empty for several years before being purchased by the city of Riverside. In 2016, it was transformed into the Morrison Family Memorial Park. 4 lives were taken too soon. 4 futures were stolen. 4 souls were extinguished by men who chose evil over good, violence over peace, destruction over creation. But their legacy survives. Their impact endures. Their memory refuses to be extinguished by the flames that took their lives. This is the Morrison family story, a story of love and loss, of evil and resilience, of a justice system that failed and then reformed, of a father who survived the unsurvivable and chose to build something beautiful from unimaginable tragedy. It's a story that should never have happened. But since it did, it's a story we must never forget. For Sarah, Emma, Sophia, and Jackson Morrison, may their memory be a blessing and a call to action.